Good afternoon, and thank you so much for finding time to be with me this afternoon. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, where I get to bring you up to date with the latest news from across the continent of Africa. I trust that your day is going on well. It is about 2 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you tuned in and joining us from. So without taking so much of your time, let's just get on with the news, and we start from Burkina Faso. The military government in Burkina Faso says it is searching for about 50 women who have been abducted by Islamist militants in the north of the country. It is the first time the government has acknowledged the kidnappings. The women were seized on Thursday and Friday. They had been gathering leaves and fruit near the town of Abinda because of severe food shortage. Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power in September, accusing his predecessor of failing to address the jihadist insurgency. The UN says about 1.7 million people in Burkina Faso have been displaced as a result of the ongoing attacks. We go to an issue related to Rwanda and the migrants facing potential removal to Rwanda under the Home Office's relocation scheme have won permission to challenge the policy. Last month, the High Court ruled that this scheme was lawful. Yesterday, ruling means there is no prospect of flights leaving immediately from the UK while it goes to the Court of Appeal. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said she is committed to making the Rwanda policy work. Under the controversial scheme, asylum seekers who arrive from a safe country, such as in a small boat from France, can be told they will be sent to Rwanda to have their claim for protection dealt with there. The scheme has so far cost the UK about 140 million that is pounds, but no migrants have been sent to the country yet. During Monday's High Court hearing, Lord Justice Lewis and Mr. Justice Swift said that 11 migrants could ask the Court of Appeal to consider whether Rwanda's assurance to the UK amounted to sufficient guarantees of safe and fair treatment. And we go to Zimbabwe, still related to the UK, and thousands of Zimbabweans have come to the UK on a skilled visa program, but some of them working in the UK's care sector are being exploited by middlemen who keep a large chunk of their money that they have earned, the UK-based Daily Telegraph newspaper has now reported. Health clinics in Zimbabwe have been facing a crisis in the last year as increasing number of nurses leave the country in search of better prospects. The UK care sector is desperately short of staff and has been recruiting from abroad, but agents working in Zimbabwe and the UK managed to take large sums of money off people who want to work in Britain, as well as those who have found employment, the Telegraph now says. This is technically against the law, but the Telegraph says that many of the employees are too scared to make a complaint. And then we head back to a story that we had yesterday and on to do with Ethiopia. And it has refused to go away. And the number of people who died during the 2-year-long civil war in northern Ethiopia is likely to be in the hundreds of thousands. But it is hundreds of thousands. But it is very hard to tell the exact number. Head of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, Daniel Bekele, told the BBC Focus in Africa. He was responding to an estimate of 600,000 dead given by the African Union mediator Olusegun Obasanjo to the UK's Financial Times newspaper. Mr. Daniel said the estimates have varied between 100,000 and up to 1 million, but it is hard to agree with any estimate without any specific basis for it. It is only when there is truth and reconciliation process that the truth will come out, he added. And the latest from Somalia, the military in Somalia has captured a strategic coastal town that Al-Shabaab jihadists have held for more than a decade. Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre described the taking of Haradere in central Galmudug state as a historic victory. He said the enemy of the nation had been destroyed. Other officials say the Islamist militant group fled without putting up a fight. The loss of the port and supply route is seen as a setback for Al-Shabaab. In recent months, it has lost swaths of territory during a sustained offensive by government forces working with clan militias, but the Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents have responded with frequent bomb attacks. And then you go to Malawi. Relearning in primary and secondary schools resumes today in Malawi's two major cities following a cholera outbreak that killed hundreds of people. Schools in the capital, Lilongwe, and the commercial hub, Blantyre, had remained closed for at least 2 weeks after the Christmas holidays. The cholera outbreak began in March last year and has so far killed more than 750 people. Infections are still high in Lilongwe and Blantyre. Health Minister Kumbize Chiponda said schools now have access to safe water and improved sanitation facilities, which will go a long way in reducing infections reported in schools. The widespread cases of cholera in the country are as a result of the aftermath of Tropical Storm Anna and Cyclone Gombe that caused excessive flooding last year and destroyed the country's water and sanitation systems. And South Africans will, starting today, begin 7 days of mourning in honor of Fren Ginwala, who became the founding Speaker of South Africa's first democratically elected parliament. Ms. Ginwala died on Thursday night, aged 90 years. President Cyril Ramaphosa has directed that the national flag be flown at half-mast around the country until the evening of Tuesday, 24th January 2023, according to a statement from his office. More details will be announced later on an official memorial service that will take place in Johannesburg next Tuesday. During the 1960s and 1970s, Ms. Ginwala lived in exile in Mozambique, from where she helped many prominent members of the banned African National Congress ANC escape abroad. Ms. Ginwala also traveled around the world, drawing international attention to the abuses during the apartheid era. And then we come back to Sudan, and Turkish spy Chief Hakan Fidan on Monday discussed intelligence sharing and other issues of common interest with Sudanese military leaders in Khartoum. State broadcaster Sudan TV has reported Mr. Fidan separately met the head of Sudan's ruling sovereign council, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his deputy, Lieutenant General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. Both meetings were attended by Sudan spy chief Lieutenant General Ahmed Ibrahim Mufadal. Sudan TV has confirmed Mr. Fidan conveyed his country's support for the framework agreement the military leader signed with some pro-democracy groups on the 5th of December. Turkey was among members of the international community that backed the deal, which was meant to pave way for the return of civilian rule in Sudan. However, pro-military and Islamist groups have opposed parts of that deal. And then we head back to Somalia and the latest news from there. Authorities in Somalia say about 26 people have been killed and scores injured in Tuesday's morning attack at a military base in Hawadli town in the Middle Shabelle region. The dead include 5 national soldiers and 21 fighters from the Al-Shabaab militant group. The attack began after suicide bombers stormed the base. Heavy gunfire and explosions could be heard early Tuesday as the army clashed with the militants. The attack comes just days after the army captured the strategic port of Haradere, which has been held by Al-Shabaab group for 15 years. Al-Shabaab has lost huge swaths of territory since August last year, when government troops backed by clan militia launched an offensive in southern and central Somalia. But the group has continued to carry out attacks, mainly targeting government buildings and African Union troops. Over the last week, it carried out 4 deadly bombings in the central region of Hiram. And then we head over to Morocco. Police arrested 6 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa on Monday, accused of being involved in violence against law enforcement officers during an evacuation operation of migrant camps in Casablanca. The local media in Morocco have reported the suspects threw stones at law enforcement officers who were conducting an operation to evacuate illegal migrant camps near the Oulad Ziane bus station in the megapolis Casablanca. the Express News website reported. One policeman was injured and 5 police vehicles were damaged as a result of the violence, and the state-owned NRT News said on its website it is not possible to confirm the incidents with the police. The Moroccan Association of Human Rights denounced violence during the expulsion of migrants yesterday. And then you go to Equatorial Guinea, where Foreign Minister has denied claims that a prominent dissident in the country died while serving a 60-year jail sentence. Julio Obama Mefuman, who was 51, died in Oveng Azem prison, and his movement is quoted as saying by AFP news agency. It accused the country's regime without elaborating of torture. But in a tweet on Monday, the Foreign Minister Simeon Oyono Eseno Angue said the dissident died in a hospital and denied accusations of torture. He said Obama Mefuman died in a Mongomo hospital due to an illness he had been suffering from. The head of Equatorial Guinea's only authorized opposition party, the Convergence of Social Democracy, CPDS, condemned Julio Obama's death in prison. Head over back to South Africa, and opposition groups, trade union and business owners have threatened to sue the government over the crippling blackouts in the country. They have given the government up to Friday to stabilize electricity supply or face legal action for contravening its duty to provide electricity. They have written a demand letter to the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan and the Chief Executive of the state utility firm Eskom, Andrea D. Ruta, saying the state was in breach of its obligation to provide electricity. Now, the blackouts have persisted for more than a decade amid poor management and corruption at state firm Eskom. Recently, the country has been having up to 10 hours of power cuts daily. The problem has prompted the president to cancel a trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos to hold meetings at home with business and labor leaders. And that is where we end our bulletin this afternoon. Surely this power crisis in South Africa is embarrassing now. President Cyril Ramaphosa, there has to be something that can be done. South Africa is one of the leading economies in this continent, and you can't have people going without power in the major towns and cities where we have businesses and industries that are supposed to be manufacturing things and providing for job opportunities, go without power for 10 hours, and now they have to invest in other alternative means of providing for power. I think this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. And, outside of the opposition groups, I'll leave that alone because they'll bring in politics. But the trade union and the business owners, they have every right to complain and demand some level of change from the government, because this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. It's not to say that the opposition don't have a legitimate concern or don't have their voices not legitimate. They are, but when you mix politics with some of these things, sometimes you don't get the best outcome. And so the business owners, they're the ones who really suffer, the owners of enterprises, the owners of, these things that get affected when there's no power. So this power crisis, the shedding and all this, this is something that the president has to address. The country has to address. And this even made Cyril Ramaphosa not attend the World Economic Forum in Davos that happens annually in Switzerland. And I don't know if him staying there, is he having meetings or is he talking with the people who are concerned? Is he finding solutions, or he's just cancelled his trip to Davos to just sit there and do what? So hopefully him staying there, he's actually meeting with the people who can help with alternatives, or what exactly can be done to solve the perennial problem of power cuts in South Africa. It is becoming ridiculous. It's becoming something else. And, and even I think Nigeria also have similar problems. And the few Nigerians I've met, they have a joke, and that's the reason why they say they shout a lot when they're talking, because they're used to shouting when they're talking, so that you're able to hear each other, because they're usually, what do you call them, generators in almost every home in Nigeria, so a lot of noise. So when you're talking, even when you're just having dinner in your house, there's a generator behind the window there. So, you can't really hear each other properly. You have to be loud. And that's why they can be loud and maybe obnoxious sometimes, excuse my language. But they joke around that is the reason why, because of the heavy presence of generators to offer alternative to power that also is a constant problem there in Nigeria. So these are things that we have to look at. Surely we have to move on. I know Kenya, we do experience some of this, but hey, Kenyans can really give you a hard time. We can't just have a power cut for hours and you think that it will just be business as usual. Heads must roll, and we need explanations, especially in major cities. But when you go in towns, when you go to the villages, sometimes the power can go out for even a month or two, and nobody really cares. I guess there are no industries there, and the economy does not get affected so much when the power goes off in the villages, because who's going to lose their work because power is not there? But they do affect the small cottage industries are there. So I think it is also important that we consider that. But what I'm trying to say in saying all this is that we can't have power go out for that long and a major power blackout, and without the people responsible coming out and giving us the reasons and explaining to us, because to us that is unacceptable. Where we are as a country, that is something that is just unacceptable. We've come such a long way, so let's just continue moving forward. And power should not be one of the things that we need to be worrying about. And we've seen how that has worked for us. So maybe that's what South Africans needs to do, just hold their leaders accountable. But I hear the ESCOM is really plagued with a lot of corruption, and I think they changed their leadership just the other day. So I don't know if perhaps the new chair of that institution perhaps might bring some change. Now, what is some happenings in Sudan? I've seen the Turkish intelligence chief has held some talks with Sudanese leaders, and by Sudanese leaders, they only met the military side. Well, the civilian side is really not part of the transition government anymore, because there's not been a great working agreement. They fell out. Remember, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok? Remember, they ousted him, put him under house arrest. Abdallah Ahmed? He said that he had kept him in his house, to just make sure he's safe, the leader of the military in the country. But there has been a fallout because of some of the very critical things that the civilian side and the military side have not been able to agree upon, that they're supposed to agree upon during this transition period. The transition period was supposed to be 3 years. That has since elapsed, and I've explained here before, the military is not very keen in walking back to the barracks and just stay there and wait for any external aggression and protect the country or things like that, because that is what the military of the country does. A lot of times that is the traditional security. They protect the country against any external aggression and the integrity, the territorial integrity of a country. I think that is the major work of a military, not running the affairs of a country. You understand? That is not what military does. So because of that, Sudan was removed from African Union, and that has also attracted other penalties that now these military chiefs are feeling, because it's beginning to trickle down and affecting even the day-to-day running of Sudan. And over the weekend, I think when we were having the show here, was it on Sunday, Dr. Matanga brought it up. And the trip that the military chief had made to Kenya to talk with our president, President William Ruto. And he wanted our president to go put a word for them in the African Union, so that the sanction or their removal from African Union, they can be restated back. There is no two ways about it. The rules are very clear. You can't keep moving the goalposts. You can't keep shifting and having your cake and eating it at the same time. It's either you choose to be in the African Union, and if you choose to be in the African Union, then there are codes of conduct. And one of very important key thing in the African Union is you can't be a member if you're being led by a military head. So Al-Burhan, if you want to be the president of Sudan, then you have to resign from the military. There's no two ways about it. And there's nothing our president, William Ruto, can do to help in that regard. So you cannot have your cake and eat it. You can't operate in impunity. There are rules of appropriation. This is a construct that you have accepted and that we have created, and rules and norms that have been created in international community and these organizations like the African Union. If you were to remain a member, then you have to adhere with some of the things that have been put forth. So you can't just do whatever it is that you want and still also get to enjoy some of the benefits that will come, and yet you're not adhering to the rules. It is very clear. So you cannot come here and expect that President Ruto will have a good word for you in the African Union, and then you'll be reinstated. Kenya's position in that is very minuscule. It's very little. We have a whole good number of countries, and it's not just Sudan. We're also looking at Mali, we're also looking at Burkina Faso, and we're also looking at Guinea. They were all removed from the African Union last year following these coups. But I still have a problem, the fact that there was an illegal transition of power in Chad after President Idris Deby died. And his son, who is a military officer, came to power, but they were not sanctioned. And I hear Nigeria really spoke on their behalf because perhaps somebody asked them to do that. And they supported that transition, and they have not been sanctioned. So I'm having some troubles with that. But these other countries were sanctioned because of the coups that took place, and the military has refused to march back to the barracks. They want to head these countries, and they still want to be in the African Union. It does not work like that. It does not work like that. So Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who is the Sudan's ruling sovereign council leader, you have to either resign from the military. You must. If you want Sudan to go back to the African Union, there's no two ways about it. There's no going round about it. And I'm sure the rest of the countries in this continent are watching, and the world is watching. So however many times trips you make in Kenya or in Uganda or in South Africa or in Egypt, anywhere around Africa, trying to talk to the leadership across board and think that they will bend the rules for you. That is not how that works. It must be people who respect some of these things that we are signatories to. And if you find that to be very difficult, then you have the freedom to just abandon the whole membership altogether. Rules cannot be changed, and that's why institutions like blocks like European Union, I think, have been very successful. And I've mentioned here before, the members there respect the norms that have been set, the rules that have been set, and you operate within given rules within that community. And if you feel like, if they felt Russia was not adhering to that, Russia is not part of that bloc, okay, they remove you. So you have to adhere. They can't bend over the rules backward for you, Al-Burhan. And if now things are very difficult for you and you realize it's becoming very difficult and challenging to run a country, let the people who are competent, let the people who have that leadership in them to run a country. You can't run a country like you're running a military barracks. That will not work. And I do understand the position of the military in Sudan since the days of Omar al-Bashir. But it is a new dawn, and you realize you can't live in isolation. You need the international community. You need an institution of the African Union. You need other people to work and to open up your country so that investors can come in, so that you can have more business, so that it's easier for your people. So if you keep insisting on doing the wrong thing, and now it's becoming very difficult for you, but you still want to continue doing the wrong thing, but you still want to, no, you can't have it both ways. You choose. If you still want to stay in power, then you are going to eat your tomatoes, however bad they are. But if you want to do right by your people and have them go back to African Union, then you have to resign from that position, or you have to bring in the prime minister, or you have to organize for an election very quickly so that Sudan can move on. You can have an election and Sudan can move on. And when we were talking earlier today, and this is something that Dr. Matanga has expressed, and I have expressed that myself, I think a transition to civilian will be very difficult because of some of the odds that the military feel are in place in regards to the ICC, and I think that is the biggest elephant in the room, and there is some legitimate level of fear of what will happen if this country is turned over to the civilian rule, because majority of the leaders in the military will be implicated should Omar al-Bashir be shipped to the ICC. And the ICC chief prosecutor Karim Khan last year announced very happily that he's setting up shop in Sudan to start investigating the killings in Darfur. Now, to the level in which this military and the government will cooperate, there's no telling, but I can assure you his efforts will be frustrated until there will be no much success for him in that regard. So Sudan, you can't have your cake and eat it. And now we see that you're meeting with Turkey. Maybe we need to pay a little more attention of these external players that have all of a sudden they are really having a presence in this continent. What is Turkey up to? What is Russia up to? To some good extent, we can guess what Russia is up to. And these specific countries, they choose to come in and partner with or help. Over the weekend, Turkey gifted Democratic Republic of Congo some arms and all that in the fight against those rebel groups. That the arms embargo was lifted, the restriction was lifted about 2 weeks ago over DRC, which I don't understand why, because any country where there's an active conflict, usually the United Nations places an arms embargo. I explained here the other day, that's why, South Sudan is, okay, fine. But when you look at South Sudan and DRC, perhaps we can't really draw parallels. But there is an active conflict ongoing. So because of that, there's an arms embargo put in place so that the arms are restricted to getting to an already hostile environment. But one would argue perhaps the DRC's government is a bit more stable compared to Somalia, compared to, South Sudan. Maybe there's some truth to that, but still there's an active conflict ongoing. So it's interesting that the United Nations lifted that restriction, and so Turkey was happy to bless them with some good number of arms. So I don't know which hands those arms will get into, and it's interesting that Turkey, would, bring food, bring medicine. Why arms? Why are you bringing more arms in a place where arms is causing a lot of trouble? When are we going to silence arms? African Union, we're supposed to do that by 2020. Instead, we're getting more arms, and that means that we'll have more arms going off and more bullets killing people. This should really worry us. And I see them now in Somalia. They have been partners with Somalia for a while now. So they're saying, Turkey is saying that it is supporting the framework that was agreed upon on the 5th of December, and that of working together. And perhaps one of these fine days I'll take us through what this framework entails and why pro-military and Islamist groups have opposed, this deal. There's some groups that have opposed this deal. So, Turkey is saying it is supporting that, and it is supporting the process of transition to civilian rule. I wonder what is at stake here, what really Turkey is up to. These countries that they just don't show up and decide that they're going to help you out of the goodness of their own self. It's because at the end of the day, there's something they stand to gain from your country. That is usually the motivating factor. So however that comes wrapped, looking like, if it looks like food aid, if it looks like medical aid, if it looks like humanitarian assistance of whichever kind, if it looks like arms aid now in this regard, Turkey, to the DRC or to other countries, then it will come however it comes. But at the end of the day, it is a problem there. Now, there is a case that was presented to the UK's court yesterday. Remember, the same High Court last month ruled that asylum policy, where any refugee that crosses the English Channel from France and finds themselves in Britain, they will be brought to Rwanda, because Britain is saying it can't really accommodate all extra people who are coming, and a lot of them are coming from Africa and other Middle East countries. And so, this is one of the key things that made Britain leave the European Union. You remember Brexit? Yeah, because of it was because of migration. So they had decided to cooperate with Rwanda, and Rwanda was meant to be receiving this. But there are some groups that went to the court yesterday to challenge that ruling that was made last month by the High Court in London. And Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said she is committed to making the Rwanda policy work. So under the controversial scheme, asylum seekers who arrive from a safe country, such as in a small boat, can be told they will be sent to Rwanda to have their claim for protection dealt with. So they're saying, we'll take you to Rwanda, and then from there we can hear your case. And you know what that means? We are not going to hear from you at all. We're not interested. So there are people who went to court to challenge this. Now the court granted this appeal, and so no date has been set for the case to go before the Court of Appeal, and the Home Office is abiding by an injunction from the European Court of Human Rights, which blocked flights until after British judges had finally ruled. The court said the group could argue that sending them to Rwanda penalized them for seeking protection, and that the entire plan is systematically unfair. Okay, so I guess we'll just sit here and wait to hear what the court will rule in that regard. So another story that was quite heartbreaking. These nurses or care workers or health workers that leave parts of the world, especially from Zimbabwe, and go seeking for work in the same UK. And so there are, I think, some agencies they work with that facilitate their going there and perhaps gets them these opportunities. And so there is a report by the Daily Telegraph that really exposes how these health workers are exploited. And health clinics in Zimbabwe, as we know, have been facing a crisis in the last year, as increased number of nurses have left the countries. We know the financial conditions in Zimbabwe and the bad, payments, the wages, and the lack of even the payments. Anyway, the times they are, I think sometimes back they went for even 6 months without any pay. So the conditions there are bad. So this has meant that all the skilled workers, the doctors, the teachers, the nurses, they're all leaving and they're seeking for greener pastures, and you really can't blame them. And this is something that our leaders in this continent must look at and pay attention to very keenly. Now, when you have your people go to another country, and even in that country, the working conditions are not very good, and yet we could do something to retain this talent and these people and these brains in our countries. But in the case of Zimbabwe, things are just bad. So it is understandable why they would want to seek for greener pastures. But this should be a learning lesson for us. So now when they get there, these agencies, assuming they're paid about, they were interviewing one person, and he was quoted as saying, you're getting paid 14 pounds per hour, but then those guys, the agencies, they will pay you 7 pounds per hour. After taxes, and then you're left with about 4 pounds per hour. So you're working for someone else, for these agencies. This is just immoral, even from a human being perspective. I know you've helped these people get these opportunities, man. But how do you sleep at night? Someone is working so hard. and then you're just reaping. Why can't you take even 10% or 20%? Why do you have to take more than what half of what they're making? That is just immoral. It's just immoral. And so I'm just hoping that by highlighting but this story having been highlighted by the Daily Telegraph, maybe the UK government will take more, will pay keen attention, and perhaps will work with. I saw here in Kenya, sometimes back they wanted nurses, but they came through the Ministry of Health. And so our nurses went there. A huge number of them failed the English test. I still don't understand how that is even possible because we are taught in English. And so, but they failed. But that was a working agreement. I wish that is what should be in place between a government and a government, so that these middlemen don't get to exploit our people. So this is something that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Labour in Zimbabwe and also in the UK should take up and see how can you have a government-to-government partnership so that these agencies that are exploiting people, that are immoral, that are greedy, unfortunately, don't get to take advantage of a people who are already beaten up. Can you imagine? You're supposed to be getting 14 pounds per hour, which translates to about 17 US dollars per hour. And at the end of the day, you're only left with $4 per hour. Tell me how that even makes sense. It's very unfair. So something needs to be done. This report should not just be something else that we're reading and it's sensational and we're talking about it and then no action should be taken. This is one of those things that the government in Zimbabwe and the authorities in the UK should take action and see how do they better this system, because at the end of the day they need all these skilled workers, not just from Zimbabwe, but also from Asia. I've seen a lot of them there as nurses and other caregivers from across, so that, people don't get, taken advantage of in this manner. I think it's quite unfortunate and absolutely immoral. And that is where we stop our show this afternoon. I want to thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can meet here tomorrow, God willing. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.